Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some adult fantasy book recommendations that are not Sanderson. I know myself and so many other people here on BookTube talk about Sanderson's works a lot, and a lot of you are like, can I hear about something else please? So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with these videos. I've actually done a few of them already, and I'll have them linked down below if you'd like more recommendations after watching this. And I will be talking about 6 different books today, and some of them are books that I really enjoy and series I love, and then some of them are books that I don't necessarily love. But if you're new here, I recommend books whether I enjoy them or not. I just think life is too short for me to try to be like, only read these ones. Jumping into it, I am going to start with one that I love. In fact, it's one of my favorite series of all time, and that would be The Witcher series by Sapkowski. We follow, I'm sure many of you are aware, if not from the Netflix adaptation, then the video game, that we follow a man named Geralt of Rivia who is a witcher or a monster hunter. And the big theme in this series are these monsters who often kill just to survive or because it's in their nature. Are they really more monstrous than human beings who kill for very different reasons, or human beings who start wars for selfish reasons? And you explore the goodness of mankind, and Geralt is often looked down upon, even though he is someone who helps rid the world of these supposed evils. So there's a lot of themes that I absolutely love in this series. I love Geralt. I love his relationship with the girl Ciri, who is a young girl when the series starts, and you see them kind of form this bond with one another. You see the bond between Ciri and Yennefer. There is a romantic plot line between Geralt and Yennefer, and it is messy, it's realistic, it's heartbreaking, it's funny. And then we also have Dandelion, who is ridiculous at times. And I do think that this reads like a slightly older fantasy. I know that's not everybody's favorite, so it's going to be a little bit, I don't want to say dated as if it's impossible to get into nowadays, but I do think that it is a product of its time in some fashion. Switching gears and getting to a very new fantasy story, we have Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This follows a man who something terrible happens to someone he cares about, and now he is seeking revenge. It's kind of your classic revenge story, but alongside that, you see parallels between our own world and how the main character Tao is treated, the kind of anger and rage that is a product of their society. Their society is broken up into a class system, and Tao belongs to a lower class. And a lot of the horrible things that are just a part of his everyday life and the part of the lives of those in similar classes, it's just there's no choices for them. They don't really have any freedom. They don't really have any options. And Tao is doing everything in his power to do what he can to not only help those who are in a similar situation to himself, or at least society views them a certain way. He's not only defying the expectations of those lower classes, but he's also trying to get his revenge. And the thing that I think makes this story challenging is that sometimes, I would say the majority of times, Tao chooses his revenge over the fact that he is kind of this hopeful figure for his entire class. And it can make it very frustrating because sometimes you're like, what are you doing? You represent more than just who you are. But at the same time, he is just one person and there's so much on his shoulders. And he puts even more on his shoulders in his effort to get revenge, his effort to be the best. There is a lot of action in this story. There's a lot of training in this story. If you are somebody who loves an action-filled book, you're going to absolutely love this one. If you like a classic revenge story, definitely go for this one. I'm sure you'll absolutely love it. Witcher is a completed series. The Rage of Dragons series, which I believe is called The Burning, is not yet finished, but there are 2 books out. The next one I'm going to be mentioning is a completed trilogy, and there are companion novels you can pick up. That would be the Queens of Renthia. Sometimes this series is mistaken for young adult, I think because our main character and a lot of the things that you see in the story look familiar to young adult works, but our character does age throughout the book, and you do have main characters who are older, and there is some pretty intense violence that takes place in these books. The pacing is quick, so I usually like to sit back and hang out with characters and see all their feelings and sit in their feelings, and this book doesn't have time for that. It just moves. You will go over a pretty large amount of time, and the books are quite short, but I really thought that the execution of the pacing was fantastic, and I love the setting. So we follow a society that pretty much lives within the forest, within the treetops of the forest, and they have zipline transportation systems, and it's just a really the way the author describes everything, it feels, or at least in my mind, I can just imagine all of it, and then it makes me want to live in a treehouse. The threat in the story is that in order for humans to coexist with the forest and for the forest to be able to function, you have these beings called spirits who are what make the forest continuously function, and then therefore humans can live within it. There is a main instinct within these spirits, though, that definitely causes problems for human beings, which is that these spirits will do anything to protect the forest. And because humans in living within the forest do end up sometimes harming it, they then want to harm humans. The only way to keep spirits from destroying mankind is to have a certain woman who is the strongest magic user to hold the spirits in check. But there is something going on because the spirits are not being held in check, and you are seeing them violently, brutally killing entire villages sometimes. Our main character witnessed something awful when she was a young girl and now is determined to try and see if she can become the next queen. But she is very clearly not the best. She's not the strongest. She doesn't have the most control over her magic. So it's one of those, I don't really think you are the chosen one, but you're our main character, so maybe you are. And there's a lot more to it. There's kind of a mystery aspect to it. You can read the first book and treat it like a standalone if you so choose. I do think that the story opens up a little bit more in the next two. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with the ending of the series, but either way, I still think that it's an amazing setting, and I think it's such a quick read. It's a lot of fun, but it's also really brutal. Next up, we have The Lies of Locke Lamora. So this is your classic heist story, but I think what makes this particular book have a little bit of extra flair to it is that our main characters, they are thieves, and they steal from other people not because they're just so wholesome, good, they want to give to the poor and take from people who don't need it. They don't want anything to do with that. They also don't really care about having riches of their own. They steal because they serve a god that wants them to steal. That's basically what it is. That's like a form of worship for them. And so it's kind of this adventurous, silly, cheeky sort of gang who comes together and creates these master plans to con people. They do end up, though, getting caught up in some things that are a lot heavier than they could have anticipated, and the stakes are set really high. But throughout the story, you get our main characters continuously being their cheeky selves. So while the stakes are incredibly high, it's balanced out by our characters having these charming, ridiculous personalities at times, and some of the ways in which they con people and trick people, you actually get to see it unfold. The setting itself is a city one, and while it is a smaller setting, it feels so alive and it feels so vibrant and so real because the author pours so much into writing this city. We also go back and forth between present day and the past, and that is another opportunity to see the culture and the development of the characters, the development of their relationships. But in general, if you're just looking for a good heist story, I think you're going to find that with this one. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Next up, we have Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This is one of the most eccentric, bizarre fantasy books I've ever picked up. I could actually see this book, even though it is definitely fantasy, I could see it being sold in fiction. It almost has a dark Alice in Wonderland feel to it. We follow a man named Senlin who goes to the Tower of Babel with his wife, and they get separated, and then the rest of the story he is searching for her. And every level of the tower is got its own, I'm going to say almost like ecosystem, its own culture to it. And Senlin is just trying to do his best to find his wife, but also hold on to his ideals because the tower is trying to strip him of everything he believes in and the goodness of his soul. Senlin is almost idealistic to a fault, to the point where sometimes you get frustrated with him, but at the same time, it makes you realize that he's just a kind of quirky, regular guy, and he's in the most ridiculous of circumstances and dangerous of circumstances, and you're like, that would probably be me. No matter how many times, like, have you ever had something awful happen and you're like, can you believe it? And someone's like, yeah, people suck, or like, yeah, the world sucks, and you're like, I mean, yeah, but still, wasn't that awful? You know how you have that, or at least I do. Anytime something awful happens, I'm always like, isn't that ridiculous? And it's usually my mom who's like, yeah, people suck. I feel like what happens in this book is that Senlin will see something awful happen, and he's like, oh, this is awful. But that must have just been like a one-time thing. And then he'll encounter something else awful, and he's like, oh, as if it's an isolated incident, when really it's like, no man, this is humanity. This is society. And the tower is showing you and is trying to strip you of your goodness. And it makes you realize you're like, that's me. I would be that person. I'm not that really cool, calm, collected, awesome hero who's just gonna take down the big bad. I'm probably more like Senlin, which then you feel kind of depressed because you're like, dang it, I wish I was the other version. It's very lyrical and literary, and if you're not really into that and you prefer a little bit more fun, adventure type of a story, then this one's probably not going to be for you. The one that probably would be for you if you're looking for fun, adventure, and then also if you're looking for romance, would be the story From Blood and Ash. This is a very easy story to get into. It's not just, I would say, your traditional sword and sorcery type of fantasy. It's also kind of paranormal, but I don't want to give too many details as to how, because that's kind of a reveal later in the story. But we follow a girl in From Blood and Ash who, she is a very important person, and it's also very important that she maintains her purity for reasons. I don't want to say too much, but she starts to wonder if the way that she's being held, kind of almost forced into isolation, if that's really necessary for the good of the realm. And she decides she's going to be sneaky and she's going to start trying to live her own life. And she has to be careful because she doesn't want to ruin the lives of others if the things she's been told are true. But she also feels like she's being held captive and she wants to have her own life. So there's this exploration of what she likes and desires in the story, and then she has a hunky guard man, and there's more to the magic and the kingdom than meets the eye sort of a situation. And it is just, it flies by. If you are looking for just a juicy, fun, good time, then this is probably the story for you. That's it though for some adult fantasy book recommendations. Like I said, I will have my previous videos in the description bar down below, as well as any book reviews where I go more in depth, and some purchase links if you would like to check these out. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.